Everyone, this is part 2 for my prophecy update for July 13th, 2010. And as I said before, you can go to my website, which is www.DiMoraMinistry.com. Once you see that video that I'm shooting here, just scroll down below and you'll see the news that I'm talking about, where we're going to continue now with some evidence about signs that are going to usher in the Antichrist. And if you've been reading my book, and if you've been reading my previous post, I give you those signs, one of which, the most important, would be the decline of America. When America, the superpower nation, falls, the ripple effect's going to hit everybody else, and then there's going to be chaos and the Antichrist from the pleas of the world trying to find somebody who will answer the question how we bring things back to normal. That's when the Antichrist will show up on the scene, as well as dealing with the Middle East peace process, as we see in the book of Daniel in chapter 9, verses read 26 through 27. I'd like to give you something from the out of Brussels. It says the European finance ministers have defended stress tests currently being carried out in 91 of the region's banks amid EU calls for governments to be ready with aid when the results are published on July 23rd. With some analysts predicting that between 10 to 20 banks could require millions of euros in recapitalizations, EU Economy Commissioner Oren Rehan said on Monday evening, the 12th of July, the national capitals must prepare for any possible pockets of vulnerability by getting their back steps in place. Adding to tensions, a number of market participants have raised a series of doubts over the thoughtfulness of the tests that are designed to access banks' abilities to withstand future financial shocks, such as the national debt restructuring. And what's happening in the European Union is the loans for a lot of these, the borrowing are going to be called in pretty soon. I discussed this yesterday. And they're looking at banks going down, as we see the banks in America that are going down. And as yesterday I told you that there were 83 banks so far in 2010 that went down, failed, taken over by the feds. And so we see that this same deal is happening with the banks in Europe, and it's spreading. And the more of these banks that close, the more we get to the coming depression, the global depression, that will usher in the Antichrist. And once these banks fall, now you have to understand, if you go back and read my previous post, you'll see that Spain, Italy, and Portugal, Greece, and some of these other nations within the European Union are just hanging on a thread. Iceland, for example. And so we see that different pockets around the world, the economy is beginning to collapse. They can't get a hold of it, and it will collapse. And these restructurings are worried about holding these banks together in Europe, and they're not doing a very good job. There isn't a man there who is able to stop the bleeding for the global economic problems. That man will step up on the scene, and as I said in my first video, that man is not Barack Obama. Barack Obama is actually adding to the depression process. And this is going to lead to a man who will come at a further time that will have the power and the ability and the charisma and all the different characteristics of the Antichrist that he will have to create even miracles and whatnot. And he'll be the man who the world will think that is going to change the global crisis, if you will. Now also there's another prophecy that I'd like to, it says Luke 21:12, Jesus talks about in the last days there's going to be Christian persecution. We see this more and more, especially amongst the Muslim community. The Islamic extremists hate Christians, and they're killing Christians in many different countries. When you look down at an article that came out of Pakistan, it says a Muslim mob and I, excuse me for the pronunciation of this, it looks like Jaihalem, Pakistan, murdered the wife and 4 children of a Christian last month, but local authorities are too afraid of the local Muslim leaders to file charges against an area Muslim and Christian sources. It says a police officer who was transferred 50 kilometers or 31 miles from this particular area where this crime took place said that the mob led by Muslim religious leader in this area killed his family on June 21st, and Khan called him to the local mosque and told him to leave the predominantly Muslim colony. In other words, the leader of this Muslim group told this Christian, "You better get out of here because we're going to kill you." They've already killed the family members, and this isn't isolated case. We're seeing this in the predominantly countries that are predominantly Muslim, and they're going after the Christians. And Jesus told us in Matthew chapter 12 that this was actually going to happen. Chapter 21, I'm sorry, in verse 12, where he said in the last days there would be Christian persecution. So it is happening, and when you go to my book, you'll see the different places, and in my sites, previous websites where I'm posting, I give you the information about the different places that are people being persecuted. Now also with this, I'd like to go to the 1 Thessalonians 5:3, where Paul talked about the peace and safety call in the last days, and we'll show you that that is also falling apart, and we believe that the second part of 1 Thessalonians 5:3, where it says sudden destruction was going to come, we believe that that's about to happen. Let me quote here. It says, Israel razed on Tuesday the inhabited Palestinian home in East Jerusalem for the first time in 8 months, effectively ending the unofficial freeze of such internationally condemned demolitions. A Rutgers photographer witnessed a Palestinian family removing its belongings from the house in East Jerusalem's Bet Henya, the neighborhood, before an Israeli excavator tore into the dwelling. In other words, the bulldozers came in and wrecked this man's house. It says they built hundreds of settlements, but I'm not entitled to live in a shack. This was one of the men who the Israelis bulldozed the house. This was what he was saying. It says outside demolition dwelling she shared with her husband and 5 children. Israel's Jerusalem municipality said that the home was built without a city permit, and so they're tearing these structures down that were put there illegally. And these kinds of news that we're seeing is painting Israel in a negative light, and this painting of a negative light is adding fuel to what Zechariah chapter 12 verse 3 told us, is that in the last days Israel would be left alone amongst all the rest of the nations, and Jerusalem was going to be the major point as far as the problems. And so when the peace and safety, this all has to do with the peace and safety issue, because part of the hang-up in the peace and safety Middle East peace talks right now has to do with the construction and the bulldozing of Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem, which the Palestinians believe that East Jerusalem belongs to them, and Israel doesn't want to give it away, and it's obvious that they plan not to give it away because they're bulldozing areas down to build more homes for their citizens. So we see the evidence of what's going to happen that will cause this new war, this Psalms 83 war, to come down. And it says when they're talking peace and safety, that is the time that the sudden destruction is coming. We see those events heading towards us like a freight train.